playoffs, he's gone for a lineup that for him is very untested at a high level. Talked about how he's not playing Face Hunter, which he's largely relied on. But in terms of Grandmasters, he has 0 games under his belt with Aggro Druid. He has 0 games under his belt with Libram Paladin. He has 1 game under his belt with Elemental Shaman, and he lost it. So, you know, overall...
That's not great, is it?
Yeah, there's 3 decks in there that really are largely untested. And by that, I don't mean that he hasn't put the time in to test them. I'm sure, you know, him and his practice partners have done everything they can to ensure that this is the best possible lineup that they could come up with for playoffs. It just means that in actual competition, in Grandmasters games, these have not been decks that he's been favoring up until this point.
Well, let's see how it pans out. Dive into the first game of this series. Jarla, of course, off the back of a victory over Psycho just a little bit earlier today. Going to be playing against Frenetic. The winner goes through to top 4, and then suddenly you're only 2 wins away from a World Championship spot.
Immediate decision here for Jarla. Yep. I think you will, right? You can still curve this out very nicely. Perhaps use Cult Neophyte to just continue to fight for the board next turn, and then perhaps your first tap then comes in on turn 3. You could even go Quest Tour Guide tap on turn 2, which is far more likely, I think, now seeing this style of board come down, because Cult Neophyte is really pretty useless coming up against this board.
Yep. And also, it still means he has 2-drop plus touch for next turn. He has Coin Soul Rend for next turn. Jarla has a ton of options here in this. Without landing a good composting yet, then this is one of those hands that Warlock can actually start beating.
Draw of the Tour Guide means that Jarl is giving a brief consideration as to whether he wants to use his coin on either the Tour Guide or the Touch of the Nathrezim there, I suppose. Frenetic, however, just starting to curve out a bit more aggressively now, playing his threats, hoping to build up a big board. And now on the following turn, you have that exact setup that I was talking about, right? Where instead of just, if he draws another minion, instead of just dumping all of his minions in one go, he can just quite happily play a Bone Chewer Brawler, duplicate it all, and then jam that composting on it at the end of it all.
Yeah.
And just say, well, you know what? Not only do you have to clear this board, you have to have the Soul Rend. If you have it, I'm going to draw 1,000,000 cards, and there's a ton of Acorns in the deck as well that can just immediately refill my board right off the rip.
Kind of interesting, because also there's something to be said for, like, if Jarla's not going to kill this Oracle, which we'll see if he is or not, he still can, with Drain Soul Touch. Like, it is a bit of a risky plan, isn't it? To say, oh, I'll let you fill up the board, then I'll Soul Rend. It will propel him, you know, much faster towards 10 cards or less.
Yeah.
But, as you said, what if there is a composting? What if there is the Squirrels come out to play after that clear, right? It's very, very dangerous indeed. He is just going to take down the Oracle, and you see the wince there from Frenetic. He would have liked very much for that to live.
Yes, I agree. And this is where he can start getting into trouble now, because now if he draws another minion off this, I think he'll be tempted to play both of those minions, in which case he can then run into a Soul Rend on the other side, which leaves him with a composting in hand that is offering 0 value. So I think perhaps with the amount of Acorns he has going in the deck that he's about to have here, he might still be tempted to go for the composting. Okay, just going to go Hero Power instead. Try and squeeze this out a little bit longer.
One bonus he does have is if this second Squirrel dies, he can actually wait for the Squirrels to pop to go composting potentially, right? Because they always, almost all the time, they pop on your own turn, which means you can choose to activate composting or not.
Oh, this is a pretty juicy looking potential turn though. Both of his minions lived, and now even through the Cult Neophyte, he can choose to take 3 cards. And the composting does do so. More Acorns going in the deck, pushing some damage. Has a juicy setup with a lot of pressure available potentially next turn from his perspective, where Guardian Org Merchant can come down and be super aggressive on the Bone Chewer Brawler.
The only problem here for Frenetic is Jarla's starting to gain a lot of time and a lot of mana. Like, that's the fear right now, because Jarla could just not kill anything this turn and focus on live tapping, maybe play Altar of Fire to get this Bristle back and Baron Scavenger more active than it is right now. Jarl's still on 25 after this heal. Weirdly enough, I still think I like the altar over the giant. Because it just doesn't give Frenetic any active card draw either.
Did you suggest not playing an 8/8 instead of playing an 8/8?
I did suggest
Can't be friends anymore.
not playing an 8/8 into one Divine Shield taunt and one taunt. It's never really going to do anything and gives your opponent option to draw additional cards that turn. Yeah, I did that. I'm sorry.
Well, I think
Not
that's
sorry.
dumb.
I think you're dumb.
Wow. I mean, that's just hurtful. Now you're just hurting my feelings. Who talks like that, Raven, honestly?
I wonder. Now going to be one card draw away unless he goes double Altar of Fire here.
Yep. Double Altar does still fit with at least the Bristleback or the Scavenger, but not both, unfortunately. Our watch post doing work, carrying the team as always.
Little bit tricky. You could just go for the null if you wanted to as well now and just double trade into one of the taunts.
Does look fairly reasonable, to be fair. He's just missing some of the removal that he's used earlier in the game. You know, the coil, the touch, etc. Could have cleared up much more effectively. In the end, chooses not to make the trades at all to deny some of that card draw. Park Panther comes out anyway, which allows pretty much the perfect scenario for Frenetic. Trade down one of the minions, get a little bit of extra damage to push. Jarla just right back in the same spot, 4 more damage going downtown.
He does now have the altar into the 10 or less cards, right? So that is a bonus. Now he just spends 1 mana on that, and he has 4 mana easily available to do Bristleback and Baron's Scavenger. Fortunately for Jarla, he is 1 mana off being able to play the Null as well. This is really tricky because he won't even necessarily feel safe at 12, right?
I think with the taunt in the way, he probably still will, yeah, because the watch post doesn't attack, right? So Arbor Up would be a clean trade with the 4 attack minion on the 6 health taunt, let's say. And then, what, 4, 8, 11 would be going face. Actually, he does still die to Arbor Up, right, with the hero power fit in as well. Oh, no, because he'd lose 1 minion here to the Bristleback anyway, right? He would still be safe. Yeah,
I even wondered if he was going to... Obviously, he's dodging card draw here, but I wondered if he was actually going to trade the Giant into the 4-2 and then Bristleback that, just because it does represent the most single target power in the on the board right now.
Even hitting the Divine Shield there isn't a natural decision, right? Because it does allow Frenetic to trade in the Annoyatron and pick up a card draw. Obviously, the fear is the Arbor Up on the other side, so bumping into the Divine Shields at least cuts into some of what they can do in terms of clearing power. But there you go, that's the punish, right? Is that Frenetic's hand was absolutely dead beforehand and now just got a little bit stronger overall by picking up that Teacher's Pet. And now suddenly, Divine Shield's mostly gone, apart from that Argent Squire, which means Soul Rend could be very, very effective here indeed. Attacks first, still 7 Acorns remaining in the deck, so good chance that card draw hits some more squirrels.
Doesn't hit Scavenger or Bristleback for the first raise deck, looking for the second one. Gets a Bristleback.
This time, yep. Still gets 3 of that healing back for free from the quest reward as well. After now having hit the Bristleback, is that better than the Soul Rend in this position? Yeah, I think with the Null coming in as well, makes a lot of sense.
More bones to gnaw on.
And maybe attack face with the Giant. Is that ever worthwhile?
I think that's looking very reasonable the way this is going. Alert! Oh, it's just always poison.
Definitely awkward. Still, even if Jarla loses this Giant to the trade, there is only one minion on board that can attack face at that point.
Squirrel! Mule! Bug!
Words.
Not enough, no Arbor up, no real threat going through. He does, of course, get the juicy trade on the Giant, which is fantastic. But still, somewhat lacking in overall pressure. And this Jarla greed, the classic Jarla greed with the AoEs here. 2 Soul Rends in hand, still refusing to even use one of them. I think that is going to pay out very, very soon for Jarla indeed, as we will try and recover our spectator as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's looking like a bit of a problem here. Is we are back, so sorry about that. We fixed it. But Jarla still has good removal. Double Soul Rend up for him here. He can still draw with Tour Guides, no problem. Maybe finally decides to commit a Soul Rend now. The only problem is this will potentially just empty his deck.
Yeah, he's just straight up fatiguing himself at this point. He is currently some way away from getting the quest done as well. 6 more damage needed to get Tammy 2 in hand.
And also, let's remember, both Raised Deads are gone, right? So...
true.
Not any way to dig back for some of these much-needed minions right now.
Meanwhile, that watch post has just increased the cost of so many cards here for Jarla so far this game.
Yeah, it's been pretty clutch, actually.
Yep. Having a real impact.
Muzzle their magic. Here for the tour.
3 damage here with the Unstable Shadow Blast to clear up, leaving him 3 more away from the Tamsin. There is the Arbor up, finally, but not representing a significant lethal setup.
Yeah, it's really tricky, isn't it? Like, what does he even do with this Arbor up? He can, of course, play the whole hand. Does he want to? Is he just going to play the Arbor up? And push some extra damage? Does he just commit the minions and use Arbor up as like, you know, like a Savage Roar kind of deal, right? And just have it as a burst tool?
I think you play it, right? Like, you know you're getting soul rended, but at least if your opponent soul rends you, you're saying, okay, you have no cards left in your deck at that point. Like, the remaining cards you have in your hand better beat me.
True. Does a 7/7 beat Frenetic here, though?
Time waits for no one.
Maybe.
It's close, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because for all we know, he just draws 6 acorns off the top next turn, and then, no, probably not. Alright, backfire's huge. That allows him to get the damage he needs, actually gets a bunch more of these cards in his hand before he burns them away with Soul Rend. If he's doing this 3 extra damage to himself, he will probably have to commit, finally, to a Soul Rend instead of just playing out the Tammy here. But it is a big deal to get 3 more of those cards in his hand before he ends up burning some of this deck away.
Yeah. Can he hold the Everett? He can, right?
Yes, now that he's drawn the Bristleback.
Yeah, Bristleback, and then trades the 1/1s, because all I'm thinking is he can have Tamsin with like 4 mana Tamsin right now with Soul Rend to get a 0 mana Soul Rend.
Okay.
It's got to be worth it. Oh, there's a Giant.
Oh, tap Giant as well. That's insane! That's just game over at this point, I would say. Tough to see a way back on this one.
Wait a minute, squirrels.
Mules? He's just dead. This watch post just has not been killed the entire game. Jarla has just ignored it, paid 1 extra for half of the cards in his deck at this point. Still just got there comfortably without even using arguably the best card in his deck with 2 Soul Rens left-hand side. It's just classic Jarla, isn't it? This is just a Jarla exhibition game at this point. And there we go again.
Yep, lost the spectator again. We'll be right back shortly, of course. There, I did wonder. I think he traded away. Yeah, okay, so he isolated the giant. I did wonder if actually trading into the giant with the Battle Guard was worth more because he must be expecting Soul Rens. So then the Soul Ren would actually kill the giant.
Yeah, I agree. He had that opportunity earlier as well. I think there was a 2-1 that could have traded into an 8-7 giant on another turn where a Soul Rend was very possible. Of course, I think, you know, Frenetic has just reached the same conclusion that we have, that Jarla's just set a personal challenge to himself this game to win without ever playing Soul Rend, a challenge that he's now failed. So there you go, 1-0 to Frenetic. We can move on. He's actually won this game, low-key. Wait, actually, now that I look at it, no, he's still got two Soul Rens in his hand. Never mind. Sorry, my mistake.
Yeah, the weird thing is, though, Frenetic's not completely lost yet. He kind of has, but he kind of hasn't.
Hasn't he? You sure about that one? Because I'm looking at Tamsin backfire in my opponent. Well, I'm not.
How many squirrels does Frenetic need?
He's literally dead!
How many squirrels could have made the difference here?
So, I mean, how many squirrels combined are capable of necromancy? Is that what you're asking?
I bet, yes.
It's a very weird question.
Jarla is going to be taking game number 1 there, and it was, I think, I agree with you here. Typical Jarla things, just stretching out as many resources as possible to get the victory there, and that normally, when it works, makes his wins look extremely safe. Like you said, he ended that turn with double Soul Ren, ended that game, sorry, with still 2 Soul Rens in hand. So, yeah, it looks very, very safe indeed, but Frenetic really did just get shut down pretty early and didn't really get the most out of potentially, say, like a composting and maybe even an earlier Arbor up would have really helped Frenetic out. It was a good effort, but game 1 goes to Jarla.
Yeah, does indeed. Frenetic did his level best. He got a little bit of help from Teacher's Pet along the way. As seems to be the style these days in Hearthstone Grandmasters, the quality of cards that can come out from Teacher's Pet is pretty disgusting at this point, but even Divide Shield Poison against the big things deck was not enough to get there in the end, as just smashing face with that giant allowed Jarla to set up for this this kill with the backfire. 3 damage plus the 2-3-4 from the fatigue, way more damage than Frenetic was capable of taking there. And that means step 1 for the aggro decks not complete. Jarla gets out with the Warlock, which I think is a big deal for the series overall. Not the biggest deal, but a big deal.
It's not the biggest deal that could exist, but it's okay. We are going to be moving on into game number 2 now. Jarla going to be on Demon Hunter, going up against Frenetic's Druid once again. So it looks like, at least for now, Frenetic's just going to keep jamming this Druid till it gets the job done. But I know you said that the Druid was a good bring for this week, but how do you feel about its performance against Demon Hunter? Is the removal good enough from Demon Hunter, or is Druid just too fast?
The removal is certainly good enough. The question is whether there's enough of it, right? Because Druid is a deck that's so brutal. The second you miss Immolation Aura for 1 turn, you can just get locked out of the game. That's not necessarily the case with other aggro decks, because what other aggro decks do is they build a board, you can't answer it, they deal a bunch of damage, and you're sad about that. However, you're Demon Hunter, so you can wait a little bit, draw a Fell Screen Blast a couple of turns later, Reno yourself back up to 30, and the game continues. If you miss a board clear against Druid, what they do is create an irreversible board state out of nowhere because you didn't kill their Razormane Battle Guard, and suddenly they just have 12 Grey Bows on the board that you can't kill anymore. And at that point, no amount of healing is going to bounce you out of that. You need to have those big board clears on demand when you need them. So yes, the cards are good enough, but they are sparse. And if you miss one at the wrong time, Druid just kills you.
Already, Jarla going to be defending against this opening push from Frenetic. Jarla does have Spectral Sight available to him in Outcast, so that's a good follow-up. But here, Frenetic is not letting go, and suddenly now, after seeing that I-Beam outside of a couple of the removal tools, this Peasant Sottle is going to start drawing cards.
This peasant's gonna farm. Perfect turn though for Jarla. Spectral Sight and Outcast into tradable. Classic way to complete the first step, and as just seems to always happen, you find yourself a Sigil of Alacrity off those draws to now drop down for 0 mana. You always have to take a quick look at your hand and say, okay, am I going to play this Sigil and then waste those 2 draws by not completing quest on the following turn? But in what is clearly an aggro matchup here, I think more important is to look at this hand and say, am I getting murdered by Druid? And yes, currently you are. So I think most importantly, that Sigil needs to get in play to find Fellscream Blast or Immolation Aura before it's too late. And since composting just came down, it might already be too late.
I mean, you give the farmers the compost, it all goes well, right? Because, like, 2 peasants with that, and that's 4 card draws minimum if this board gets cleaned up. So many more if the peasants continue to live. Frenetic's just going to draw his whole deck at this point.
Yep. Keeping pace with card draw the deck on the other side in Demon Hunter, right? He's 22 cards left versus 20. He's going to draw 4 more as soon as this board dies, 2 more at the start of turn. Like, he's just drawing quicker than OTK Demon Hunter at the moment. Might be the last opportunity for a while to ever get a Magtheridon down, because as soon as there isn't 3 board spaces, you just can't make it happen anymore.
Also,
it's just a ludicrous amount of damage to give to your opponent.
It is, but it is the turn before Arbor Up, so maybe there's value in it, right? Maybe Jarla just says, I need to draw removal. He does have a 1-mana Arcanist, so any of the AoEs could make this work. I don't hate it. Locks out a lot of Frenetic's options for next turn. His options will be Go Face, Hero Power. Done. Maybe a composting. I like this a lot.
Alright, Maggie. Show us what you got. Oh! Like, it almost doesn't matter. If you don't draw the Immolation Aura, you die to Arbor Up. If you draw the Immolation Aura, you're gonna die to all of these cards that Frenetic has just drawn. Like, this is the best possible refill that he can have for the turn after. He just needs a Greybow or a Teacher's Pet on top of this to actually make it the nuts.
Slide into... No, that's not gonna work, is it?
Acrobatics, 2 draws for a Fellscream or an Immo. That's none of the above. Illidari Studies. That's Spectral Sight. 2 draws now for exactly... So Spectral Sight would be 2 draws for exactly Fellscream Blast, right? Or he could have played the other Spectral Sight that costs 0, which would have been 1 draw for Fellscream or Immolation Aura. He still has it. 0 mana Illidari Studies into Crimson Sigil Runner. Into Fellscream Blast. That's not that.
Can you give spell damage to a Dreadlord Spike?
Checking. Interaction wiki. No, doesn't work. Okay.
Worth the question.
Yeah.
Just pick Glide. That's what winning players do, right? Yeah, there's just no answer. And we're obviously sat staring at Arbor Up in Frenetic's hand, so this might be, unlike Game 1, a rapid response from Frenetic.
Dreadlord's Bite, of course, although it doesn't clear the board, it doesn't kill the 1/3s, which is what we were largely focusing on that turn. It does at least take a huge amount of damage off the board and means that the attacking minions left behind, it's only 3 minions doing 3 damage each from an Arbor Up. Does keep him alive for at least 1 turn.
As a Face Hunter player, seeing an aggro deck have this many cards in hand makes me cry.
All right. 3, 6, 9. Go get him.
As you said, the big benefit here for Frenetic is his refill continues to be absurd. Like, it doesn't matter if this Magtheridon comes out, doesn't matter, maybe even if the board's cleared after that, unless there's huge heals along the side as well. He can just make boards for days, and he still has that second Arbor up in his hand to help out.
Yeah, and it's being timed perfectly as well, right? Because he just got to stick Arbor up and actually have it be good this turn. And then 6 mana is the turn where the deck does the most broken thing possible, which is Oracle into Razormane. The Razormane gets duplicated, so you then get double discounts on something else. That makes a Teacher's Pet or a Greybough cost 1, which means it then also gets duplicated by Oracle's effect. So you end up with Oracle, 2 Razormanes, and 2 of your 5 mana Taunt, which you played for 1. That whole thing costs 6. So you want to do it on turn 6, which is why this has worked out perfectly now for Frenetic, because if this board gets cleared, that's his refill.
So strong. Jarla does have the options here to clear this, and of course he has to, and he will. But no heal available for him is the big problem right now, isn't it? Not necessarily that he had to heal right at this second, but just no heal in general. Although Park Panther will get the job done.
Panther. The one thing in the deck powerful enough to stop him from doing the best possible turn his deck can do. Alright, we'll just have to make do with this, I guess. So disgusting.
A good response, I guess.
Yeah. So as we now know, Frenetic has a 2/4, 2 2/3s, 2 4/5s, and 2 Divine Shield Poisons on his board. So that's pretty good.
Pleasure doing business.
Alright, Outcast Glide actually representing significant value against an aggro deck, but he does have basically all of his own good stuff in hand, so I'm sure we won't be doing that anytime soon.
Slight issue as well is the pretty dead on board.
Mm-hmm.
Does have Eye Beam with Arcanist, but again, probably doesn't quite feel like enough right now.
No, he needs more Moargs, another Fell Scream. To go with the Arcanist, he needs like a full Reno this turn, or a complete board clear, and the complete board clear is very difficult with 2 Teacher's Pets involved.
Grows short.
Yikes. Did not want to see that. That's a whole nother level of threat.
I see.
He's just going to have to take the heal.
Was that?
Yep. Yep. Takes the heal on the left-hand side. Did draw the Immolation Aura at the last moment, but that was not going to represent a full board clear. In that spot, he would be dead to the 4/4 out of the Cobra and the remainder of the other Teacher's Pet. So he just had to go for the play that theoretically kept him alive, but second Arbor up will put a stop to any hopes he had of coming up with a sweep in this series. Jarla doesn't do things the easy way. He settles in for the long haul, and that means Frenetic is able to square the series up 1-1. Aggro Druid was not a deck I was scared of getting a win for Frenetic in this series. Felt like it was going to get there one way or the other. And as I said at the start, yeah, Demon Hunter has game in that matchup. I think it's a tiny favourable for the Aggro Druid. I think the Demon Hunter's fine, but it's this exact situation. A board like this happens, you need to clear it or else you die. And then they make another one, and you need to clear it or else you die. And there's only so long you can keep doing that for, even with the potential added clearing power of Magtheridon.
Yeah, and even with some help from a Discover Dreadlord Spike, just wasn't going to be enough in that instance. So a bit of a tough one there for Jarla, but again, it's probably okay with that one getting through. It's going to be a much more questionable deck now coming from Frenetic. Jarla is going to be on that Anaconda Druid, but Frenetic is going to be on this Elemental Shaman, and unlike RDU, he is not playing the Doomhammer list. He's playing like it's kind of weird, right? A slightly slower but also slightly faster list. There's some more value in there. He does have the Fire Elementals, Alakir and such, but he has no Doomhammer to make up the difference. So we'll see how that pans out. But he's going to be going up against Anaconda Druid, and this is a at least for me, Sol, a pretty decent matchup here for Frenetic on this Shaman because he can just so consistently get on board so early.
I think, in general, his lineup exists to have
His
good
lineup
matchups.
is a good matchup versus Druid.
Correct. Yeah, no, that's actually what I was going to say. Yeah, because I think we've seen a lot of people coming at it from different angles, but there has been a common theme where people have generally wanted good matchups against Anaconda Druid. It makes sense. It's a deck that people are likely to bring that does have polarized matchups that you can exploit. We've just seen players going about it in different ways, right? Like, Frenetic has Warlock in his lineup, which some people who've been targeting Druid have chosen not to have. Just having Warlock in your lineup does shut down the Celestial Alignment game plan for Druid generally, but it doesn't mean that you have a guaranteed matchup against them because the token Druid style that the deck can play in does still sometimes beat Warlock. So instead of that, some players have gone another way, but certainly good old-fashioned board-focused aggro decks, aggro Druid, Quest Rogue, Elemental Shaman, these are the things that just beat up on Celestial Druid. So this, for me, is where the series really begins. As I said earlier, the Warlock getting a win for Jarla was nice, but it wasn't the biggest deal. This is the biggest deal. The Druid needs to get a win in this series for Jarla to come out of this one.
As you can see here, slightly different build than what we saw from RDU, as I was saying. There's some cheaper weapons in there as well. There's a few more ways to kind of cheat out some extra mana or some extra stats. But in general, all Frenetic will be looking for here is just those early minions to start getting the elemental chain rolling. And Kindling Elemental is a good start.
That's not a bad hand for Jarla either, it's got to be said. Anytime you have Lunar Eclipse in your opening hand, in basically all of your bad matchups, you want to have Lunar Eclipse in your opening hand. Jarla has it. Just the ability to cheat a ton of mana and the ability to Celestial Alignment extremely quickly could be very beneficial here for Jarla. But as you were reacting to, the Wind Fury coming down on turn 2 is going to represent a ton of damage extremely quickly here.
Yeah, now even worse case, having Whack-A-Null is just pushing more and more damage. Even if it buffs the Kindling, which obviously Frenetic won't want the buff to go to, it's still just a reasonably statted minion pushing damage, right? And it's all just, as long as Frenetic can do something every single turn, Jarla's going to be in a really tough spot.
Yeah, agreed. Damage just going to keep on coming thick and fast here for Frenetic. And since that opening hand looked fairly appealing overall for Jarla, it's run out of steam very, very quickly. Did land the buff as well on the Wind Fury, which means even more damage going through. Jarla just looking a little bit stuck at the moment. Staring at a hand with really limited options against this. Lightning Bloom does give him the opportunity to just absolutely go all in if he really wants to. Try and survive the overload turn.
Yeah.
But even then, his follow-up isn't even that impressive with what he has left behind.
And again, with Frenetic's deck, it's just, especially with what he has in hand, right? Unlikely he won't have something to chuck down next turn and keep on the pressure.
Yeah.
He's gonna go Cenarion here? He is.
Gonna go Cenarion. Yeah, I prefer this. I think the alignment almost certainly leaves you dead with the overload turn. The amount of damage that you have coming through on the other side, another swing of the weapon, potentially hitting the Wind Fury then attacking you multiple times, like you just die at that point, right? So I think this makes the most sense. He's looking for something that affects the board immediately. That'll do it.
Okay, well, at least Frenetic drew an elemental, right?
Yeah.
Because now he can Lily Pad Lurker next turn. It's just unfortunate, I guess. Oh, we got torn.
Ooh,
That's huge. I was just about to say, it's unfortunate that the Moag Artificer is going to be able to kill the Wind Fury, but now it's not.
What were you complaining about, Frenetic? You're the nuts.
You're just going to win. Lily Pad, and then the options of Lily Pad or Fire Elemental the turn after. This has tempo written all over it.
Yeah. I mean, the first part of that turn where he drew an elemental that cost 4 or less was not particularly surprising, right?
Yeah,
That's
I would like I was saying. Yeah.
That's kind of his deck at that point, but rolling the Taunt Totem was absolutely massive.
I was like, do I put 1 damage into this 3/6 to try and... And of
He
course,
knows he's getting hexed, right? He knows what's up. Sometimes you just feel it in your waters. I think all he's doing this turn is like, okay, if I'm getting hexed, what's the best thing to attack?
well,
Bottom line, doesn't matter, just sucks.
and to be fair, that outcome is reasonable, right? Because Frenetic played the 2-drop off the top and hero powered that turn, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of other better things he could have done if he had access to them. But yeah, lily pad, and now the strength of like, it's almost the first lily pad actually makes the second one back-to-back so much stronger because you've gained a 5/6 and then you get another strong tempo play the turn after. So even if Jarla could play the Scenarium Ward right now, although the armor would probably annoy Frenetic a little bit, the actual minion just gets batted aside like it's nothing. Because there's no there, wait, is that just lethal with double bolt?
4, 8, 13, 15.
That's right.
Double bolt, exactly, yeah. Because he landed he needed the 1 in 3 on the Wind Fury for that to end up being lethal, and he hit it.
Wow.
A sequence of very fortunate events there for Frenetic, but you can play that matchup 100 times until you see the normalized pan-outs where Frenetic doesn't get very lucky. He's still winning nearly all of them. That matchup sucks.
Yeah.
Just curving out against Druid is just the best thing to do. They can't deal with it ever since Wrath and Swipe and all of these tools were taken away from them. They've just had serious problems in interacting with minions, and it's a very, very exploitable strategy.
And Jarla even got off, there was a long shot, right? The chance that the Scenario Ward would carry. But with those lily pads there, the time bought from the Taunt Totem was, of course, insane. It was so good for Frenetic. Really made him win the game that little bit quicker, I guess. But in general, like, you can just see his hand. And as we were saying with the 2-drop being drawn, the whole deck below Fire Elemental, apart from, obviously Alakir, is below that threshold, right? So even the likelihood of him having something to activate Lilypad with was almost a given with the card draw off the top. So just a strong play overall, but we are going to be moving on to Frenetic's last deck that he has to win with, and it is a handlock, but a bit of a different one. We're not seeing Altar of Fires in this list, but we are seeing a couple of extra tech cards. Spice Bread Baker in there and Rustrop Viper as well. So a bit more of a slightly old school approach as opposed to, I feel the majority of the players now are looking very closely at these Altar of Fire lists.
Yeah, and I do think more and more as time has gone on, we've started to see the benefit of it, right? I think it takes a bit of time to come around to the idea that Altar of Fire isn't necessarily like a combo killer or a control buster or a fatigue card. Altar of Fire is low-key just an anti-aggro card, right? Like, that's what it comes down to in a lot of positions. So I think expecting a good chunk of aggro decks coming in to this week, I think Altar of Fire was a smart pick. I think playing it also does give you some additional game in matchups like this, right? I think it was Derek that's described this as like the most toxic matchup in all of Hearthstone right now, because so often it just comes down to whether Altar of Fire hits the Demon Hunter key combo pieces if you are playing that card in your deck, which, Frenetic has chosen to go a different way here.
Does it mean you'll be relying on the more old school approach of just getting those big minions down and piling on the pressure and trying to get Giant down nice and early so Jarla doesn't have the freedom to just keep drawing?
Slowish start, both players, neither really exploding out of the blocks here. Frenetic has the classic turn 3 handlock decision of tap versus backfire. In most scenarios, it is better to go with the tap, especially when there's an increased number of ways that you can spend that 1 mana. Frenetic has the tradable. He also has the tour guides thrown in there as well that he can get moving with. In the Altar of Fire list, sometimes you'll just happily spend that 1 remaining mana on an Altar of Fire in some positions as well. But in this case, just using the tradable on the Viper.
Jarla already going for a coin into Magtheridon down here? Or is he going for Glide, I imagine? Okay. For a second, I don't know why, but to at least my silly eyes, it looked like he was just, like, hovering Magtheridon after that. But no, Glide makes much, much more sense.
Yep, I think that's, again, another crucial reason why you don't want to backfire too early in this matchup, because it's that same sort of stack the deck dynamic that we've talked about multiple times on this broadcast. You want that ability to bounce back, which Frenetic absolutely has now with the backfire that he's drawn after the glide. You can see how much more favorable that interaction is for him. Tap before the glide, get hit with the glide, backfire after the glide, as opposed to the other way around, which would be a disaster for him. Again?
Imagine it's going to be Spectral here for Jarla.
Looks that way, yes.
I see.
It's 2 and 3, still has the acrobatics for 4 and 5. He's going to go that way, doesn't really find any better options, so I'm sure that's what's going to happen. Okay. Not worth, I don't think. Can get a target for the Fellscreen Blast by playing the 1-mana Moarg that he has, but it's not enough card draw here to be worth it, I think. Like, this is a brute, it's a brute Demon Hunter play, right? Doing that in that position, just trying to get some cheap brutes down. I don't think there's a significant payoff for Jarla doing it in this version of the deck.
Yeah, not when you're just already staring at how far away is Jarla even away from lethal at this point, right? Like,
oh, Bly's lethal? Yeah, he has nearly got Bly's.
Yeah, I mean, the hand almost plays itself, right? He just needs to just, you know, one extra draw, get a tiny bit more mana. I think he's doing okay, especially because Frenetic hasn't put down any threats this game, right? Like, nothing's really happened because he got glowed. He then replayed the backfire trying to get the Anetheron active, but even now, he can play a Spider Tank if he wants to, and that's about it. I think Jarla's got all the time in the world here.
Yeah. I suspect he... Oh, he does. Okay, so he's just going to go tap Anetheron next turn, I suppose. My concern there is that I think he's then short of playing Giant. Oh, no, because he has the Tour Guide as well, so I think it does all work out in the end. Fair enough, sure. My fear was by playing this, because you had to spend mana before you were able to play a Anetheron for 1, then your Giant would be too expensive to get down alongside it, but I think it still works out with the Tour Guide.
Jarla does get hold of Tusk Piercer. And do you think Jarla is going to go for this? Just try and hold off for a couple of turns and then push? Obviously, he needs to get hold of a spell damage, but he's...
I doubt it, honestly. Like,
I think after he sees what Frenetic's going to do next turn, right, is the problem.
Well, I think also if you break down how far away he actually is, like, it looks close, right? Because he has double Moarg, he has Il'gynoth, he has Fellscreen Blast. He has to spend 7 mana just for all of that, and he still needs, at minimum, a Talented Arcanist to go with that for it to be like a genuine OTK if Frenetic starts healing. So that's 9 mana currently that he would have to spend if he's going to go down that route. And that's a long time to wait without using any of those Moargs, any of those Arcanists to clear up your opponent's Giants at the same time. So I think it's unlikely that these exact pieces that we see in hand right now are the ones that are used to end the game. Good timing as always, though, on the Magtheridon. I think this is the best usage of the card in the matchup. Not just to wait until you see a board and then play it out and clear it. Play it preemptively and make your opponent have to think twice about whether they want to even play threats onto this board, right? Because this was going to be a very clean Anetheron plus Giant turn for Frenetic. But now he knows that, well, you know, he can call Jarla's bluff and say, well, actually, I don't think you have the clear for the 1/3s. But that's a colossal risk to take, right? When your entire board then just dies to Arcanist Fellscreen Blast or something like that.
We like this, though, putting some kind of pressure on, otherwise you've got the exact same problem next turn, because Jarla probably won't clear this board if nothing's developed into it.
I also like this as well. I think we've seen this one too many times from Jarla and Psycho's opponents, who have generally been the Magtheridon players in these positions, where they just haven't played cards into this Magtheridon setup, and then Jarla/Psycho's gone, cool, draw cards, get on with my game plan while you're not pressuring me. So I think actually putting on a significant amount of pressure that Jarla is forced to do the clearing thing is the way to go about it here, but he just held back. You saw there was a moment where Frenetic was 1 mana off from playing the Giant, so you can imagine if he played the Tour Guide for 1 and tapped for 0 instead of tapping for 2, he would have also been able to get the Giant down that turn, but just viewed that as just a little bit too much to be throwing out into a Magtheridon.
Here though, Kurtrus is done for Jarla. Still needs to play it, of course. But he surely has to clear this up now. That's too much damage. I know Jarla likes to take its value, Sottle, but this is ridiculous.
I mean, achievement unlocked, beat Aggro Druid without using a Soul Rend. He's now going for the next level of that achievement, beat Handlock without using an Immolation Aura. I'll have to see it.
I think he'd lose the achievement and get the new one who's lose to Handlock.
Yeah, much easier to unlock.
At least now Frenetic knows that's done and dealt with, as in obviously not the 12/12, but the Magtheridon effect in itself. Still 6 cards left though.
Here for the tour?
Before he gets that 10 or less, of course.
More bones to gnaw.
Oh, he can clear now though, right? The trade, the Shadow Blast, and the Drain Soul?
Yep. 1 mana off playing Giant with all that, though.
Where is he on quest?
Even doing it in this order, that's a good question. Maybe that is incorrect. 4 out of 8. Doesn't get enough. Only gets 2 from this.
Okay.
So only takes the 1 source of damage. Doing it this way is efficient, though, because it means every spell that he cast either healed him or dealt damage to him, which is getting the Giant as cheap as possible, which is what he's interested in. But yeah, just that 1 mana off from actually being able to get the Giant down that turn.
My quest, my revenge, it all ends.
Pre-Kurtrus turn for Jarla. Start getting on with some card draw quite happily. Just a mere 1/1 on the other side of the board, and that's the power of Magtheridon. It's such a pressure release valve, right? When you get that clear with Magtheridon, you're almost certain in the current meta, pressure's not coming back the next turn, because they're going to spend that turn dealing with your 12/12.
Well, we're nearly at 9 mana, Sol. And I recall you saying something like that was lethal.
No, what I said was that those combo pieces you asked if he would save would not be used to end the game, which is a correct statement, because one of those Mohogs is already gone.
Don't believe it. I think it's hiding behind the other one.
They're just lined up in such a way that from an exact angle, there's an optical illusion that it's only one. But if you look at the Swiss Alps from a certain angle, they look like a Toblerone. Do you know that?
Is that true? I feel like you might be...
No, that's not true! Of course that's not true.
I knew it. But could you make a Toblerone look like the Swiss Alps, though?
Oh, much easier, yeah. Just smash it up a bit.
Flash Chat going to come down here from Frenetic. He still doesn't have access to the 10 or less effect to get those scavengers down, which means he's just off really threatening anything with this Battleground Battlemaster as well. Frenetic's been awfully slow this game. We're just getting towards those 10 cards, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Glide is a hell of a drug. It did a lot of damage to him in that early game. Caused him to have to set up, probably delayed a Netheron by 2 turns, which was the first threat really coming down, and then there was another delay coming from the Magtheridon coming down, which he had to deal with as well, which has slowed down his pressure.
Wait, is this lethal?
Well,
he has Fell, he has I-Beam. Oh, he's got 2 I-Beams as well, right? got Fell Scream, I-Beam, I-Beam.
Sure.
Yes. So one Fell Scream is 6. The I-Beam
I-Beam.
is 6. The I-Beam is 6. The Fell Scream is 4. Yeah, it is.
Oh, wow.
Really,
Nice.
really good catch.
Out of nowhere. As soon as Jarla hovered that, I was like, what's going on? But the fact that you could just unlock the I-Beams in the right times, the 2-0 mana Fell Scream Blast, bit of a weird way to end the game, but end the game Jarla did, and that means we are going to a game number 5, which is going to be the Warlock we just saw from Frenetic, going up against the Druid, right? The deck Jarla has lost with, or one of the decks Jarla has lost with in this series so far. So Warlock and Druid, probably not where Jarla wanted to land on in this last game of the series, right? After this one, as this one might be a little bit tough, at least with the Celestial side of things.
Yeah, I think first things first, spotting that one probably makes up for the mislethal with Rogue that he had earlier on in the series. So
I'll allow it.
we'll chalk that one up as even. But yeah, secondly, I think this is a very fitting end to the series because, as I said, the Druid is the struggle bus for Jarla, but I do think the Warlock matchup is the one where he has the best chance of getting the deck out because his deck does do some stuff that Warlock struggles with, just not really the Celestial Alignment part of the deck. And also the fact that the Druid can just beat everything, right? Which is, I think, a big part of the factor why a lot of people chose not to go target Druid because they view it as too risky. That ability to just spike something insane with Cenarian Ward or just have that perfect hand where they go alignment and then just win the game next turn because they have the perfect Anaconda follow-up. All of those things are always possible, but even without that, the token Druid elements of this version of Anaconda Druid can still do a lot of work against Handlock.
Yeah, sometimes even just them drawing ramp is enough, right on curve, like having the strong ramp opening is enough to outpace some decks, because obviously Warlock has gotten slower and slower as the expansion has continued with those patches, and if Druid hits the ramp, then okay, Warlock's dangerous with Giants and stuff, especially after Celestial, but if you're doing 7-8 mana things when they're still tapping on 4, you know, that's still a big gap that Druid creates, even though it feels like an older gap and less crazy gap than we're used to nowadays. Ramping, like chain ramping early game is still an exceptionally strong thing to do in Hearthstone, especially when it's up against those decks that just don't have any way to compete, right? Giant does get cheaper, but we're talking turn 6, turn 7, not 6 mana, 7 mana for Druid, which is much, much earlier in the game. So it's going to be a closer one here than some of the matchups we've seen so far in this series, So I'm excited to dive into this one and see if Frenetic can just move on into top 4 and it's that chance again. I know the Derek and Gia and APAC would talk about it, of the chance of Possessi just winning both playoffs. The chance of Frenetic winning both playoffs is there, and it would be pretty incredible overall.
What if it just happens? What if we just get entirely duplicate results?
Then we'll look at it and go, 5 points was too much.
I mean, fair, but I think all representatives would still have made playoffs even without the 5-point bonus. Lorinda can confirm that for me if that's the case for Nalgudan, but I'm pretty sure it is for the other two. But I just think it'd be super interesting, right? Even if they both do super well, like maybe they're all in top 4 or something like that. Like, I think we'd then have to look back at this year of Grandmasters and say that, like, competitive Hearthstone from like a competitive integrity sense is in a good place, right? Like if the same players are consistently winning, you look at APAC and it's just Alan plus Japan every single week just farming. You look at Europe and it's just, you know, Gabby and Bunnyhopper and Blythe and Frenetic just picking up wins all the time. And if we then have, you know, every season 1 winner continuing to do well in season 2 playoffs, you have to look at it and go, well, kind of working as intended, right? The good players seem to be winning.
The big thing here is, as well, is if Jarla loses, he isn't out, right? Like he is. I know it's felt like a little bit longer today, but if he loses, he has to play again later on in the day. So it's going to be it does take the loss versus Frenetic. It's going to be a very long day for him, and I imagine a very mentally taxing day.
Yeah, we are not even halfway through Group B and through our broadcast yet at this point. This is only our second match. So we still have 2 elimination matches to follow up after this. One with Psycho and Falcane, and then one with the winner of that versus the loser of this. So still could be a particularly grueling day for Jarla if he then falls at the final hurdle in this one and then has to go on to play a 3rd series today.
Yeah, they're already Jarla getting off to a decent start, at least just having the card draw available. Now he has options of whether that looks like Glowfly, whether because he already has Anaconda in hand, he decides to try and make some kind of plan around that, and maybe decide that the Innovate, for example, is worth saving along with the Bloom for the Anaconda. Options.
If I coming down, blocking the overgrowth turn, most importantly, I think, from Frenetic, just making sure he can buy as much time as possible before those disgusting ramp turns start going off. But as you mentioned, Jarla's hand is full of options. Ramp, not really one of them. He just has a much more Anaconda-focused hand than he has a ramp into Celestial-focused hand right now.
Yeah, he can do this, though, which is pretty nice. Eclipse into, I imagine, guess the weight. Just to draw additional cards and then set up for, like I said, options, right? Next turn, he can go Anaconda. He could now with this hand maybe look at going for Celestial, but again, I doubt it. I think it's a little bit too risky. Not sure if you agree on that one, though.
Against Handlock, with a hand of this quality already that you can probably just win with Anaconda straight up without the Celestial alignment, yeah, I think it would be...
Right. You'd be overloaded, right? Which is the big thing.
Right. You'd be overloaded, there'd be monstrous threats coming down on the other side of the board. Like, yeah, I think, as you said, Jarla's got too many options right now. He's got to decide what's popping with this hand. And I don't think it's Celestial alignment.
Frenetic can get the old turn 5, 10 card or less. Oh, Glowfly is such a devastating card because, like, from Frenetic's point of view, is he really gonna like drain soul, touch, right? And I do like this approach from him here. It's definitely scary, but I do like it because I think if he just tries to kill every single minion possible with all of his mana, he just falls behind. So I do like just tapping, getting the Anetheron out.
Just barely, by the skin of his teeth, survives the turn. But the Anaconda can still start coming into play. Has Bloom, has Solar, has 2 Innovates, has Germination, has the Fungal Fortunes to follow that up, has Arbor up, which will be free as well. The world is Jarla's oyster. Frenetic head in hands. He knows how disastrous this is going to be. He has preserved the Soul Rend for this kind of situation, but these minions are about to get way too big for any of that to matter.
And he only needs the second Arbor up, right?
He does. Nature Study's unlikely to find him any real outs here. Power of the Wild, though, could be making me a liar.
But 6 each and then +4.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
Solar Arbor still fits with the Nature Studies discount. Power of the Wild was the out from the Nature Studies. Everything else was likely to be too slim.
And just like that, the fastest...
Oh, no, he's still 2 off. He's still 2 off.
I trusted
no, it's only 28.
Oh.
It's only 28. He's a little bit short.
So,
which means he now has to think about the trades happening instead.
Yeah, double trade.
The fear otherwise, at least one trade, because now this way he's playing around Soul Rend to an extent. It needs to be Soul Rend plus to be able to clear this up. Soul Rend plus a lot, in fact, as well.
Yeah, the Anaconda 2 on 10 health is a big deal, right? It's very not susceptible to any real damage.
Down to 11 cards. Even if he were down to 10, there was not a Bristleback available with only 2 mana.
I mean, Frenetic has to heal, right?
He has to heal,
He has to drain soul. There's no option whatsoever here. If he doesn't, he's dead. Does Tap finish his quest?
No, he's 0 from 8 right now.
Oh, wow, okay, yeah. I was just trying to work out, because you obviously Tap, Quest, Drain Soul would actually make the Giant playable, see if that did anything, but yeah, Frenetic comes to the same conclusion. He simply has to Drain Soul so he isn't dead to hero power. And what's Jarla got for him here?
Oh, Nature Studies again! Feral Rage! Feral Rage!
Oh, that's it! Or Kodo.
That one definitely works, Raven.
Yeah, I'll
8
trust
plus
you now.
4.
Jarla takes the victory and still probably the fastest game he has ever played. Taking down Frenetic and again buying himself some time to rest, because as I mentioned earlier, if Jarla lost this match, you'd have a short break and then play again today. So with that victory, Jarla 2-0's out of the group and moves on to top 4, beating Frenetic. So a huge congratulations to Jarla. At minimum now, going to be top 4 in Season 2 of Grandmasters this year. And it was another close one, Sottle. None of these have looked particularly easy with both series. First versus Psycho, now versus Frenetic. Both of them going to the full 5 games, and even then, not looking particularly easy for Jarla. Except maybe this one game.
Yeah, no, very true. And honestly, like, towards the end of that game, I was starting to get a little bit worried for Jarla. After I realized that the lethal was just a little bit short, I kind of had questions about the turn, because yes, it became very difficult to clear with the Soul Rend and the Drain Soul, as we saw, not being enough to clear out the board, but he had the potential to do it over multiple turns, right? Like, if a lethal out was not found there from Jarla, Frenetic then clears that up on the following turn, and that's basically Jarla's whole deck gone at that point. His deck doesn't really do anything else after that fact, with just the Cenarian wards, I suppose, left for significant threats, or having to reset his hand up to a high size to get the other Glowfly Swarm down in that situation. Could have been a real struggle if he did not hit the exact lethal out at that point with the Nature Studies into Feral Rage. So I do